Um, yeah, let me find my timer went away. Okay, you can identify however you want, and the time's yours.
I don't thank you. Thank you for having me on. My name is Cameron. I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict. Um, I was separated from drugs and alcohol August 17th, 2011. This time, I had been separated from drugs and alcohol a time before, April 15th, 2001. Um, what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. Uh, I don't know that I ever had a period of time where I was different. I I was using meth at 10 years old, and I instantly wanted to do more. Um, the first time I did it, my initial thoughts were, how can I get more of this and never stop feeling this way? Um, I was born and raised in Bountiful, Utah. Went to a school, first Tolman Elementary, then we moved. And while the house was being built, um, I went to Oak Hills Elementary where I met a friend. I would slough elementary and leave to go to his his house where his sister had drugs in the room, and we'd break in and smoke cigarettes and smoke the rest of her drugs. And she would come home extremely pissed that we had done up all of her rest of her stuff. And so we'd go back to elementary, just running around like crazy kids, high on meth. At the time, it was crank, it was on aluminum foil. Um, I've never been able to control the amount I took. I think that right from the start. So what it was like was exactly what happened um, to me. There was never a time. I mean, because before 10 years old, I was. My mom would describe me as a pretty loving kid. Um, Drugs and alcohol made me angry. Most of the time, uh, violently angry. Um, it wasn't very consistent at that time. It was whenever we could get our hands on it, but it seemed to always happen. And but junior high, it it got pretty consistent. Um, Junior high, then high school, it was definitely it was almost every day. It was something. Uh, Done almost every kind of, I've never done heroin, but I've done opium. I mean, that was, I thought that was weird when somebody showed up with some opium, like, hey, let's give it a try. Let's see how it goes. I stayed away from pills. I didn't really like pills. I liked the meth enough, but I also like to drink. Um, so things progressed fast enough. Uh, I would consider myself an addict at that point. And I didn't really know the qualifications because I never knew what an addict or an alcoholic looked like. I wasn't getting in trouble for that, but I was getting in trouble for all sorts of other stuff that was connected to the drugs and alcohol, but never got charges based on that kind of stuff. As a juvenile, we were out after work. Uh, we the Bountiful Burger King. They just tore that down. It's now a Cafe Rio. The Bountiful Burger King, we would, after we got done cleaning up and closing the store, which was always late, midnight, 1 o'clock, we'd go up on the roof and we had bongs up there and we had all sorts of drugs. And then we decided, hey, let's go out stealing stuff. And that got me in a whole bunch of trouble. 32 misdemeanors and 14 felonies as a juvenile, and spent a lot of time up in Moita. And then I was on probation. At the time, it was trackers. So I didn't have an ankle monitor at the time, but I was confined to the house. Then I was given permission to like go find work and go to a job or go to school. And I had to go to the school and I had to be home quickly. I was given a certain amount of time, and then there was always a tracker that would show up at the house. There was trackers that showed up at school. That was probably the main reason why I got good grades. That was probably the only reason why I got good grades. I had to. I was forced. I graduated Bountiful High School with almost honors because of that. Being on probation from a very early age, from 16 to when I graduated, I was on probation, and I had trackers. People would bring stuff up to the house and drop it off. I had money because I could still go to work. And while I was at work, I was still getting loaded. I worked at a place called Orbit Sprinklers and Irrigation down in Woods Cross. And we did janitorial. So we were kind of like behind the scenes. Nobody really paid attention to us. We could just go in the bathroom, pretend like we were cleaning, and get loaded and get drunk. That got me in a whole bunch of trouble. Some of the guys that one night we were drinking, and one of the guys climbed up into the ceiling tiles and fell through, and we all got random drug tests. And yeah, I quit before they could do the random test, and they wondered why I quit my job. I just gave them some BS excuse. Going along, it was I was 22 years old, 2001, when I got some serious charges. I had a storage unit and I was working in a body shop. Over at the storage unit, I wasn't making meth there, but I had chemicals for equipment and equipment for manufacture of meth. And at the time, people were going away for like 25 years. Davis Narcotics Strike Force showed up because the boss that I had over at the body shop wrote a letter to the Davis Narcotics Strike Force along with a couple other guys. They showed up, and my world came crashing down. I knew I was already an addict, alcoholic at that point. Based on these qualifications, I knew there was something wrong with me, but I didn't know exactly what. And that came a little bit later. It took a long time to get into a treatment center because I kept at the work center. I'd go out for work and I'd come back loaded, and the drug court judge, he kind of had some troubles with me, and I caused a lot of troubles too. I finally got accepted into a treatment center, another treatment part of the treatment center, and then I was finally accepted in drug court. I stayed sober for 6 years after that. And really what I thought AA and what recovery was just hanging out with people that were sober. And I did a lot of Cocaine Anonymous, a little bit of AA, but more Cocaine Anonymous. My sponsor was a guy named Mark Lemoyne, who's passed away. Loved hanging out with that guy. I really, if he was to, what he really represented was just living the program that's described in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. We did things like retreats up to a monastery in Huntsville where we hung out with monks over a weekend, and we just hung out and we did fun things. I wasn't really introduced to the book until I'd known of it, but this time I had a lot of time to go over it, because August 17th, 2011, because I had relapsed on one Wasatch Hefeweizen up in Park City. Somebody had said to me, well, you don't drink, and what are you doing? And it's probably not a good idea. And I said, I know it's not a good idea, but fuck it. I'm going to do it anyway. I was just at that point. If I'm looking back, I would definitely say that there was a whole bunch of resentments in connection with this. Tried to stay sober. I'm getting more charges. I'd gotten through all the charges with drug court previously, and had all those felonies reduced to misdemeanors and was okay. And then I'd racked up a whole bunch more. Something after I started drinking, I got this idea, this wild idea that, well, that wasn't so bad. You know, I didn't instantly go to jail. Things weren't such a problem. Maybe I can do some meth one time, and that was supposed to be on New Year's. That continued on for quite a bit of time and a whole bunch more charges until probation and parole, and it all caught up with me. I was on probation and parole, and then I was supposed to the last time check in with AP&P up in Davis County, and the probation officer, I couldn't quit. I had stopped all the times before, and this time I couldn't stop. And I sat in a jail cell. Something happened. I don't know exactly how. I just describe it as I was done being done. I had this moment. I knew I was an alcoholic addict. I'd gone from an addict to an alcoholic addict to a junkie and a drunk. And I just progressed through all these things. I knew the progressiveness of the disease. It was like right in front of me. Like I couldn't stop, even if I wanted to. There was no ability. I felt very powerless. I was powerless. I had no control, and I had no choice. In that state, it was continue on to the bitter end. I sat in that jail cell. I basically did steps 1, 2, and 3, but kind of. Step 1, I admitted that I was powerless. I could see it. My life was unmanageable, but I still didn't comprehend why my life was unmanageable. I thought just because I was doing drugs and alcohol is the reason why my life's out of whack. And once I skipped right over step 2, coming to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. I've never been a praying guy. For that, the only time I prayed was, God, I need some more shit, and it always showed up. That was always the case. I got to this point, I skip right over step 2, and I get to this, made the decision to turn my will and my life over the care of God. No, not really. I still didn't comprehend this. It was 6 years later, after some more jail time, another treatment center, and being sober. I was in my backyard. Me and my wife were staring at each other, yelling and screaming at the top of our lungs. Was in like this red out. My life was unmanageable sober. Imagine that. Drugs and alcohol weren't even a part of my life, and my life is still out of whack. There was a guy who I always talk to. He's one of my other sponsors. He had always mentioned in meetings, you know, you can call me. I'd called everybody else and nobody answered. And so I called him, and he says, it sounds like you need to do a 4-step. Went through a 4-step, and it really drove me back into the book and into meetings. I needed to be there. I have a wife that's not really interested in anything AA. She still believes that I don't really need to go to AA. She's pretty resentful towards that thing, but ironically, she is the first person to give me the big book in a time that I was coming down. I'd been on a long run, couple weeks. I'd been up for a couple weeks, and I'd been going pretty hard and crashed out. And I wake up to her telling me, here's this book, you ought to read it. And what is a book about alcohol going to do for me? And this last time locked up, I read it like 4 times. Every time AA was called in jail, I would go, and there was a guy named Gary Jones who's passed away. He died with 30 years sober. First time that I had seen him was at a club in Bountiful. It was called the Backstreet Club. And each one of the times, it's been in 3 different locations, and he was at each one of those, along with his wife Sylvia, who was part of Al-Anon. There was a guy named George and his wife named Teddy. George, Sylvia, and Gary have passed away. Teddy's the only one that's still alive out of that whole group. But they would sit at the end of the table, and they would say all the AA things and all the Al-Anon things, and Sylvia would give the best hugs. I knew there's something that worked, because the last time in the treatment center, there was a whole bunch of us, and we had learned about platitudes, and we would go back and make fun of the people. There was a group of guys from the treatment center that would make fun of the guys in AA and say all these platitudes, and because we knew they didn't work. But I noticed something, that I got out, and I was there for a while. It was almost a year and a half I was at this treatment center. And of all the guys that I saw come through it, not a single one were still there or sober. Most of them had gone back out and were living the life, or they had died. And but all those guys in those AA meetings still saying all the silly little platitude things, they were still there, and they were still sober. And I took it to heart. So I went back to some meetings, and going through the steps this last time, I saw some things that really need to be changed, and some things that I missed. That's what I really hope to show people, that if you're not reading that book, if you're not seeing some of the things in that book, you might want to take a look at them, because if your life is not going so well on how you've been living it, maybe you ought to do a course correction and see about some changes. The last treatment center I went through was not a 12-step. It was a cognitive distortions kind of thing. It's a cognitive therapy. And it was good for me to see. There was a counselor there who was running that facility. And he says so many things that still stick with me today. I saw him just the other day, and it was pretty incredible, in a bank. And he had always said, if you see me out on the streets, don't come up and say anything to me, because he couldn't. He was kind of limited to his things, and he actually came up to me and said hi, and it was incredible. I wish I would see him again. I didn't thank him for all the things that he had said, because they still ring true today. And he's not an alcoholic or an addict too. And a lot of the guys were like, how could you help me if you hadn't been through what we've been through? And many of the things that he said, they still work in my life. I don't use just one thing, because I don't think there's one magic bullet or silver bullet that'll fix this addiction and alcoholism type problem. I have to incorporate everything that works. And a lot of that was in that treatment center, and this guy named Derek. It was really good to see him in the bank and tell him I'm still 13 years sober. And he looked at me and said, "Hey, it's been that long?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's been that long." My life today is entirely different. I own my own business. I'm a window cleaner, owner operator, window cleaning company. I tried to have employees, didn't work too well. It was a hard go about it. I've had employees with another window cleaning company. We had 17 employees, and I was kind of wore out. I'm kind of a solo operator, and it's a good deal. It gives me the opportunity to talk with a whole lot of other addicts and alcoholics throughout my day. I really enjoy that, but it also, at the same time, it's frustrating. I see a lot of people not getting well, staying sick. I don't know if the drugs are better or more potent, or just they'll kill you faster. I try to live this program as best as I can. I'm not one I've struggled with a higher power. Off and on. There's been a lot of times where I've been very agnostic and atheist, and there's times I've seen certain things in my life where I can't explain it, and so it might be God. I don't know. I don't know if it just might be a blank spot in my life where something happened traumatic enough that my psyche shifted and shattered in such a substantial way. But I mean, the prior time with the 6 years, I wasn't doing anything like I'm doing this time. I am in service in AA. I like doing that kind of stuff. That um that is also frustrating at sometimes because I'm seeing a shift in people. They want the easier, softer way, and I'm not that kind of person. I put in the work, and I like putting in the work. Today I just got done hanging off a building, high-rise building, putting in the work, and I really enjoyed it. I just get a lot of satisfaction out of that. I think I'll stop with that.